So, as we move into our final panel discussion of the day, and we're keeping very good time, I want to introduce now Evren Essen, Vice President, Research and Analytics, Ethics and Compliance Initiative. Evren, a very warm welcome to you. Good afternoon to you, South African time, and I hand the Congress baton to you.
Thank you very much. I hope everyone has enjoyed the event thus far, and we look forward to talking with you all today about tone at the top and mood at the middle and the interplay between those areas and ECI's Global Business Ethics Survey data. So, as mentioned, I'm Evren Essen, the Vice President of Research and Analytics at the Ethics and Compliance Initiative. I oversee two main areas. One is the research content that comes out based on ECI's Global Business Ethics Survey. And I also oversee ECI's advisory services that we offer to our members and non-members as well in the ethics and compliance community. So with me today, we have two panel members that I have a pleasure of introducing. The first is Carol Yanofsky, Director of Global Ethics and Compliance at PwC. Carol, would you like to tell us a little bit about your role and your company to start? You're on mute.
There you go. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
The past 18 months, you think we would have learned by now. But thank you, Evren, for the introduction, and thank you to the Congress for inviting me to participate. It's been great working with the team here. So, as Evren mentioned, I'm a director in our Global Ethics and Compliance team, which sits in our Global Office of General Counsel at PricewaterhouseCoopers. PricewaterhouseCoopers is a professional services firm, and we focus on assurance, tax, and advisory consulting. In this global role, we basically support and provide resources for our PwC network of firms, which are all over the world. You probably heard of PwC, and I'm very privileged to share with you during our presentation some of the initiatives that we've developed to support tone at the top and actually drive a compliance culture. So I'll turn it back to you, Everett.
Thank you, Carol. And also on our panel, we have Pia de la Cuesta, who is a Regional Compliance Officer for Europe, Africa, and Airport Solutions at TK Elevator. Pia, tell us a little bit about your role and your company.
Thank you, Evren, and also let me thank IFCA for the invitation to participate on this panel. As you rightly said, I'm a compliance officer for Europe, Africa, and Airport Solutions at TK Elevator. As you might know, it's a German multinational group with focus on urban mobility. We produce, repair, and maintain elevators, chairlifts, escalators, passenger boarding bridges, and other airport solutions. We are more than 50,000 employees all over the world, present in more than 50 countries, and with sales of over 8 billion euros. And as you rightly mentioned, I'm responsible for Europe, Africa, in particular on the southern part of Europe, as well as the global business of Airport Solutions.
All right, thank you, Pia. Now I'm going to share my screen. I always get a little nervous before I do that, so hopefully this will work. You see the screen?
Yep.
Yes. All right. Great. So today we are going to have a Q&A related to some very relevant data points from ECI's Global Business Ethics Survey which was released in March 2021. We'll use the data kind of as a backdrop to set the context, and then Carol and Pia will bring in insights and relevant real-life examples from what they're doing in their organizations, what they've seen in their organizations, in order to provide you with some practical takeaways. A little background on the Global Business Ethics Survey. ECI has been conducting this research in one form or another since 1994. And the purpose of the survey is to really examine workplace integrity from the perspective of employees. So employees are asked questions about their workplace in terms of their awareness of different ethics and compliance program elements. They're asked questions about ethical culture. And then we ask them some ethics outcome questions, which include pressure to compromise ethical standards, if they've observed misconduct. If they did they report the misconduct? If reported, did they experience retaliation? So for the data that we'll be talking about today, it was collected with 14,000 employees located in 10 countries in the latter part of 2020. So the important thing to think about is the context under which the data were collected was during, of course, the COVID-19 pandemic. And many of the countries were full force dealing with the pandemic at the time. So that's an important thing to keep in mind. We have been collecting data related to this survey in the US, as I mentioned, from 1994 on. In the rest of the world, we started collecting data in 2015. So we do have trend data for 9 countries other than the US since 2015, if you'd like to look at that in the report. So with that, let's go into the first piece of information that we're going to talk about today, and that is ethics culture strength. I think most people know culture. An easy way to describe culture, it's generally how we do things around here. So kind of sets the expectations for employees in the workplace about how to behave, how to conduct themselves, how to interact with each other, and so on. In the Global Business Ethics Survey, we asked specifically a series of questions that gets at ethics culture strength. And what we found is that when a company has a strong ethics culture, wrongdoing by employees is significantly reduced. So that's the reason why ethics culture strength is so important. In order to calculate ECI's culture strength index, we look at approximately 20 questions from the GBS, and those questions look at accountability of top management, of supervisors, of co-workers. And again, this is based on employee perceptions of what they're seeing in their workplace. We also ask about trust. So for example, do employees trust that their top managers will keep their promises, their commitments? And we ask if employees perceive their top leaders, their supervisors, their coworkers as setting good examples of ethical behavior. So we don't have trend data for countries outside of the US for this particular data point, but we do have data that we calculated in the most recent GBS. And as you can see, when we look at the global median, so all the countries, all the employees across the countries combined under the global median, only 14% of employees indicated, based on their responses to those different types of questions I mentioned, that their workplaces have a strong ethics culture. When we look at there is some variability, and when we look at the US, this is something we have been measuring for the last 20 years in the US. And this number of 21% has stayed relatively stable since 2017, when we last calculated this for the US. It's doubled since 2000, when we first started measuring ethics culture strength. But this year, we see that India has the high, based on employee perceptions, the 28% of companies that employees were surveyed from indicated that they have a strong ethics culture, followed by Brazil and the US. So I will now stop sharing my screen so that we can have a discussion here. So, Thea and Carol, how do you all in your companies promote and strengthen culture in your organizations? Carol, would you like to go first?
Sure, thanks. First, I want to also thank the ECI for expanding the report to cover countries all over the world. As I mentioned, I sit in a global role. I'm in the United States, but I sit in a global role, and it's really just critical for us to have that data from all over the world. So I think that's enormously helpful, and we use it in our program. But in terms of culture, I mean, from my perspective, culture is everything, right? We're in a professional services organization. We're all about people and behavior. And our overall mission really is to drive culture. And the first thing, that we thought about when we're putting programs into place is what exactly is culture and what are we trying to achieve? And for us, the way that I describe culture is it's really a culture of respect and good behavior. It's really kind of the foundation of everything we do. And so we drive that to support the business, basically so we can create an environment for all of our partners and staff to enable them to be their best selves at work. Because it may seem obvious, but if you're in an environment where you feel threatened or harassed or bullied or generally uncomfortable, you are not going to do your best work. And aside from sort of the technical kind of speak up culture that we're trying to promote in terms of reporting on harassment and claims like that, we want people to come to work with their best selves in terms of the actual work that they do and their creativity and their innovation and their, solutions for clients. And so if you're in an environment where you are not free to speak up, whether it's in a team meeting or it's to report a concern, by definition, you're not bringing your best self to work. And so what we do is we try to promote that culture. And I'll add, in terms of respect and good behavior for us, I would add integrity and quality to what we're trying to create. And we kind of embellish that and embed that in everything that our team does. And I'll talk about this in more detail throughout our session today, but basically we do training. We do kind of creative, high quality training that's meant to engage the learner to show good behavior, bad behavior, real life scenarios so people can watch it and think about what they should model and where the resources are to go for help if they have questions. We embed this sense of culture in all of our communications. And by training and communications, we are kind of past this, sort of 1 hour check the box e-learn or just sending out an email, to constitute communications. We're trying to be very creative in terms of how we engage with all of our partners and staff. And so we use training and communications very broadly and very creatively to encompass everything from kind of a 2-minute message with real actors to portray something to, something that's more technical that may sit underneath that in an e-learn. We also, for a lot of our initiatives and projects, will draft communications templates so that our counterparts in the firms can use those and also use them for their leadership. We actually sponsor a number of global initiatives, and we prepare these materials and kind of support all of our member firms in terms of how they roll them out. So again, in terms of training and messaging and communications, so that our messages are aligned, we kind of embed them in everything that we provide to the territories. And one thing that I really like to do that kind of combines all of this is I put toolkits together for our territory. So we kind of package up what we do and make it very practical and very accessible and very easy for our firms to customize it, for their leadership message or their particular culture, but to give them some real life materials that they can use in their firms. One other thing I'll just mention before I turn it over to Pia is that PwC has just embarked on a very public kind of business branding and marketing campaign that you all may have seen. It's called The New Equation. And we actually rolled it out across the network, across the globe. I think it's the first time we've ever done something that aligns all of our firms. And the foundation of it is about building trust and sustained outcomes for our clients. And so I've taken that message and really embedded it in our ethics program, because to build trust, you need a culture of compliance and you need all those things that I just spoke about. So I think, from an ethics and compliance point of view, to build a culture, we need to do all the things in our toolkit, but we need to partner with the business and make it relevant for the business so that the business leaders can talk about it seamlessly as they're promoting their agenda. And it gives us a great opportunity to partner and support the business as well.
That's great. Thank you, Carol, for sharing. And I'm going to ask another few questions after Pia gives her response about specifically what you're doing to help leaders strengthen their culture. But first, Pia, please tell us what you're doing in your organization to promote and strengthen culture.
Thank you, Evelyn. First of all, I'm taking what Carol just said, which I totally subscribe. I think one thing in which I insist a lot is the importance to have the right management, the right leaders. So this all starts with the recruitment process of our leadership, our managers. Because without engaged leaders convinced that culture is essential to conduct and drive businesses in the right direction, there is very little compliance officers or compliance departments can do to create a compliance culture. So I think it is essential that we put the focus on the recruitment of the right leaders to change or to create a certain culture in a company. And for that, you might know that there are different leadership styles, but we need alchemists, we need strategists who are capable of transforming organizations from the wrong culture to the right one. So this is something in which I insist a lot, that we cannot do anything without the right people, without the right leaders. So the most important thing is to have the right leaders driving this process. Once we have that, another suggestion I always do, and which is clearly embedded in our company, is that we need to keep the message of culture and compliance live and vivid. That's why we stress the importance of culture and compliance in every management presentation, in every quarterly report, in every annual report. So our people know that in every management presentation, in every company report, in every encounter we have, be it in presence or be it virtual, after the introduction, the first slides will always go for safety and compliance. So these are two elements which are absolutely key in our organization, and everyone understands this as a part of our core values and business. Third, I think it's absolutely key to increase the level of acceptance of our culture and our compliance program, is to involve employees and leaderships in every compliance initiative we intend to implement, be it, I don't know, the setup of compliance values or leadership principles, elaboration of a new code of conduct, or even for every compliance tool we want to roll out. Right now, for example, we are adapting our code of conduct, and we are giving the employees and leaders the chance to have a say on it, to say what type of standards they want to follow. So we have prepared a draft, and we are organizing workshops to get feedback from them. This feedback will be then forwarded to our headquarters before the final version of the code of conduct is rolled out. Then, as Carol also mentioned, we also make available toolkits and practical guidance to our employees. And what we do also, which is I think very, very useful and very powerful, is to arrange informal compliance discussions with employees in addition to e-learnings and classroom trainings. Informal discussions are key to convey the culture message and help us a lot to understand the worries of the business, the problems in more detail. So I really encourage you to use this type of meetings or encounters with your employees to really understand what the problems are and to maybe discuss in a more friendly way, not just us giving a training on what is corruption, what is an antitrust violation, what is harassment, what is mobbing. We need to understand what they want to tell us. And then one last thing I would like to mention is the importance of including blue collars in the compliance message, on the culture message. We just rolled out, for example, an e-learning on compliance values, which all employees without exception have to complete. This is very challenging because we have a significant portion of our employees who do not have a laptop, for example, who are just technicians. So this is a big challenge for us, but this gives you an idea of how important culture is for us at TK Elevator.
Great, thank you, Pia. So you mentioned a couple of things related to leaders. One, making sure you hire the leaders with the qualities and values that you want so that they will fit into the culture you're trying to promote. And then also engaging leaders in the development of, in this case, you mentioned the code of conduct. Are there specific things that leaders at your organization are asked to do to promote ethical culture? Are there specific things that each leader is asked to take on to play their role in creating a strong ethics culture?
Well, we have a sort of ambassadors in every subsidiary or group entity. which are so-called compliance managers, and they form a core part of the first line of defense, and are at the end of the day responsible for the implementation of the compliance program. So we asked them, I mean, they have their own leadership structure. So the compliance manager in the higher level assess compliance managers of the lower level in compliance issues, be it, I don't know, completion of e-learnings, number of trainings, number of investigations, etc. But we also ask them to report on compliance topics in every report they have to do for, I mean, in terms of management or quarterly report, annual report. They are asked to present results or initiatives on compliance. So this is something we do on a regular basis, at least on a quarterly basis. What I do still miss, and what I'm trying to encourage a little bit more, is to have a specific performance targets on compliance, because I guess that is essential for those employees or those leaders who are not so much convinced on the importance of culture and compliance, but who will just understand that if this affects their money they get at the end of the month or of the year. But I think it's good to have this type of targets or incentives. Be it, I don't know, X% completion rate on e-learnings, or number of compliance initiatives or dialogues organized in the previous quarter, things like that. I think that is very powerful.
Thank you. Those are some really great examples. Carol, what are your thoughts on leaders promoting culture?
Yeah, I mean, it's critical. And to pick up on something that Pia said, we kind of have a shorthand for the leadership, sort of the right people in the right role, right? And I should kind of step back for a second and just explain, like PwC, we have over 150 firms in that many countries with almost 300,000 partners and staff. So it's quite a big organization all over the world. And so this culture is different where, you know, in different places. Where we sit at the global level is to really support all of our member firms. But a critical part of building our ethics and compliance structure is we have ethics and compliance leaders at each of those firms. And as Pia said, that's just critical because obviously we're a partnership. We can't do all that from the center. We can provide support and resources, but it's the folks on the ground in those, you know, in those countries, in those firms that are working with their other stakeholders and working with their firm leadership that are really critical in sort of building it. So what we try to do is to provide them what we can, but it's really up to the leaders on, you know, in each of the firms to carry the message forward, and kind of all of the initiatives and actually all of the requirements, as Pia mentioned. You know, there's training, and it has to be monitored and completed, and there are certain things that we hold people accountable for to make sure that they do it. The other thing I just wanted to mention, that's sort of the foundation for all of this, is we have a code of conduct that applies to our entire network of firms, and we have a company purpose and values, and so those really are the foundation. And so that people understand kind of what the expectations are for behavior. It's all based on kind of those purpose and values and the code of conduct. And then the local firms are expected to sort of build that out based on whatever they're seeing within their firm. But there is an alignment and kind of a foundation overall of the PwC firms that is based on, you know, those two really critical documents.
Wonderful. Well, that's a good segue into how did you manage all those different locations and offices during COVID? How was the compliance culture impacted by COVID? and remote work environments?
Well, I could pick up on that because it sort of is a nice transition from talking about our purpose and values. You know, one of our values is care. And I can say from a personal perspective, but I've just seen it at every firm, at every level, kind of the caring and the empathy during COVID has just been a part of our culture here. It's actually nice to see. As difficult and as challenging as the past 18 or 19 months have been, and you know, everyone across the globe has been affected in some way or another, either personally or through a loved one, in terms of their work and their school and their health and their travel and all of that. So I think it's really strengthened our community to care for one another. And what's been interesting from a personal point of view is, you know, as I mentioned, you know, we work with leaders all over the globe, and you'll work, you know, get on the phone with one country and you've read in the news that it's just COVID is having a devastating effect there. And so you spend a little bit of the beginning of the call asking them about it and really caring about it instead of just diving into work. And we've just seen kind of the ups and downs of different countries and how they've dealt with COVID over this time. So I think from our ethics and compliance community, and we've seen it just, you know, across the whole firm, just caring for one another. Our leadership, we've seen it in leadership. We've seen an enormous amount of outreach, both for our values and sort of from an ethics perspective, but also just about logistical things. And so they've sort of woven that message about care into those messages. From an ethics perspective, I think we have been very focused on making sure that even though we're not in person and, you know, we don't see each other, we're on these, you know, virtual platforms, that people still treat each other with respect. That people still kind of feel included and encouraged on their teams, because it's hard when everyone just kind of hunkered down and everyone's at home and we're not traveling and we're not seeing people in the office and we're not attending kind of team meetings and bigger kind of network meetings, that people do still feel engaged. And I think sometimes it's actually harder to keep that culture of respect when you're virtual, because there could be a sleight of hand or a curt email or something like that that people just don't pay attention to. And we've really tried to kind of convey the message that leaders especially, but sort of everyone on down, really needs to keep that in mind as they're, you know, going about their day-to-day business and really encouraging our culture.
All right, well, thank you. So I'm going to share my screen again. Again, get a little nervous. Here we go. All right, so as we think about COVID and the impact that it has had on organizations across the globe, I wanted to bring in this finding from our Global Business Ethics Survey. We looked at the impact of organizational change on ethics outcomes. And for the purposes of our survey, the way we defined organizational change was any sort of major change in the organization, mergers and acquisitions, layoffs, changes in top management, budget cuts. And so based on whether an organization had at least one organizational change of the ones that I mentioned or none, we see that there's a big impact on the pressure that employees feel to compromise ethics standards. We see that there's a big difference in observed misconduct, as well as retaliation. So do you agree with this statement or with these findings? Is this something that you've seen in your organizations? Pia, would you like to respond first?
Yes, I mean, I have to say I haven't seen a specific increase on misconduct and retaliation. But what I really have seen is that people with all these movements of Me Too, etc., and as soon as they start knowing that they have a whistleblowing hotline, that there are different mechanisms to blow the whistle, they are starting to use it. So we do have seen an increase in the number of reports we receive through the hotline. Also, employees coming to us personally to report on certain irregularities. But let me say a few words on retaliation. I don't have concrete figures on retaliation because obviously this is something difficult to measure in a company. But it is very important to be consistent with the zero tolerance approach most of the companies have with regard to compliance violations. And this zero tolerance means that we need to be determined when it comes to imposing sanctions for compliance violations, no matter who's involved. I've experienced various attempts by companies to hide compliance violations when top leaders with excellent business performance were affected. And this can completely ruin the reputation built over many years. So back to the topic, I think it's also important to explain employees how the whistleblowing hotline works and how the investigation process works. Because even if we say that anonymity and confidentiality will be granted, will be guaranteed, it might be difficult to do that in a compliance investigation of something which only 3 people in the company know. So if I am reporting something that only my supervisor knows, and the investigator needs to confront this person, it might be difficult to warranty confidentiality on that. But as I say, it's not always easy to protect employees, but we need to make them aware of the fact that they need to be careful with what they report, because depending on what they report, the person against whom they are reporting might know who has made that report. But as I said, I think it's key to have a clear determination to protect whistleblowers who report in good faith. And that is really very challenging in organizations. So I've seen many occasions in which our employees were not sufficiently protected or were left in a situation which they considered unfair. So yeah, it's challenging.
And are there, going back to change, and especially the change that many organizations are going through now and have been going through due to COVID, are there recommendations related to which compliance initiatives that you would recommend to the top management of a company during times of change?
Is that for me or for, yeah?
Oh, either. Whoever would like to take it.
Yeah, can I just
Sure.
add one thing just to what Pia talked about, and something very specific just in terms of organizational challenges. You mentioned part of that definition was new joiners or people joining and leaving the company. And just to give you some statistics for our previous fiscal year, which is July to July, as I mentioned, our total headcount for all firms is almost 300,000. We had over 90,000 new joiners last year, which is a huge number. I mean, it's part of our growth strategy. I mean, it's an exciting number. It's a good number. It's kind of a scary number too, because these are people coming in at all levels, right? From right out of college or university to experienced hires who may be at, we're at a different company with a different culture and a different risk tolerance. And so what we do right off the bat, which I think is just a critical part of our overall compliance program, is new joiner training. And what we've developed on our ethics and compliance team is training that covers very specific and substantive areas, from the code of conduct to, anti-corruption, AML, all of our key compliance policies. Again, it's very engaging, really good kind of training that's a deep dive that new joiners are required to complete within 3 months of joining the firm. And it just gives them sort of what the policy requirements are, what the expectations are, where the guidance and resources are. So as soon as people kind of walk through the door, we provide this so that they really understand what the requirements and the culture are. And I think it's critical when you have that many new joiners coming into an organization, because as you know, people can change the culture pretty quickly when the numbers are that high. And so it's worked very well. It is a requirement, but that's just like one very specific thing that we do to address some of these organizational changes.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. Thank you for sharing that. So I think we have about 3 minutes left. And the time went so quickly, but I do want to at least share one more data point for our discussion. And really this focuses on the reporting of misconduct. I've also shown here kind of the rates of observed misconduct across the globe. And there have been some increases when we look at the trend data in terms of observed misconduct. But where we've seen bigger jumps are in the reporting of misconduct. So for example, this year for the global median, 81% of employees said that they reported misconduct if they observed some wrongdoing. And that's a jump from 63% in 2019 and 58% in 2015. So given this jump, and if we think about things that have happened over the last year, in addition to COVID or the past couple of years, if we think about the Me Too movement, the diversity, equity, and inclusion movement, there's a change in the cultural norms. And I'm wondering if that may be something that is contributing to the increases in reported misconduct. What do you think about that, Carol? And are you seeing increases in the reporting of misconduct at PwC?
Yes, we are. And I think all of those external factors, Me Too, whistleblower legislation, regulators requiring, behavioral reports, has certainly contributed. And as I mentioned, I love that you're including, some global data points, and it's very consistent with what we're seeing. I would also say that increased reporting is a good thing. If people look at their helpline and think, oh, nothing's there, everything's great, I would bet that's not the case. And I view an increase in reporting and just reporting in general as very positive and just a critical part of our ethics program, because if we don't know about it, we can't address it and we can't solve the problem. So our platform is kind of promoting the speak up culture and encouraging people to come forward. In fact, we just finished rolling out an ethics reporting helpline and back-end case management system across the globe, across all of our network firms. So now we have a really, best-in-class system to support our ethics program. But we are absolutely encouraging people to come forward, because without that, we can't address it. And so, from the ethics helpline, we have robust reporting and analytics. We can do root cause analysis, and then we can be proactive and figure out where the issues are and what we can do to go in and address them. We're looking at that on both a global level, but also each of our firms, because they have a separate and secure tier of their investigative data for them to dig into the data and for them to figure out on the ground what is happening. So the data is just critical. And now that we have a system and we're getting this real-time data, we're really encouraging people to use it and to use it in a way that really bolsters and strengthens our overall culture and promotes the speak up culture.
Thank you. We have a little bit of, I think we're running over a little bit. Pia, I would love for you to add to whether you think that the societal and cultural differences are contributing to an increase in reporting, if that's something you've also been seeing at your organization.
Yes, absolutely. In the statistics we pull on our police whistleblowing hotline, we see a huge difference among jurisdictions. Well, we receive few complaints from Europe still, even if we have some local legislations which allegedly should foster whistleblowing. We have many more coming from the US, from Latin America, or even from certain countries in the Asia-Pacific region. But I even see that not only with regard to whistleblowing, but also it's funny to see how much certain jurisdictions like to talk about compliance, especially in countries from Latin America, even if they are not so mature as, for example, European or US companies, but they love to talk about compliance. When you do a training to explain how the whistleblowing hotline works, they start using it, and even for no important things or things which should be resolved bilaterally, not through a hotline. But yes, they are also the ones that first complete e-learnings, etc. So it's not only about whistleblowing, but in general, they like to talk about compliance, and it's easier, let's say that, to address compliance topics with them than with European countries. That is at least my experience, even if they are not as mature as we are. In terms of developing local legislations, etc.
All right. Well, thank you. That's fascinating. Very, very interesting. And thank you both for your wonderful insights, sharing what your companies are doing and your perspectives. It's been very valuable, and I've thoroughly enjoyed working with both of you on this panel. So with that, we'll pass it on to Q&A.
Everin, we are going to move on from there. Unfortunately, time is against us, but thank you so much for chairing an excellent panel discussion. As you rightly said, valuable insights emerging from that. To you and your panel, thank you very much indeed. Our last panel session for day one of the IFCA International Compliance Congress.